There are moments when you find yourself asking why someone could hurt you and feel nothing at all. No apology, no glance back, not even a moment of hesitation. They move on as if your pain never existed. As if you were nothing more than a faint name on a list of people who once passed through their life. But the pain you feel is real. And the strangest part is not what they did, but the indifference that followed. You might think, maybe they're ashamed. Maybe they need time. Maybe they don't realize how much they've hurt you. But then you begin to see the truth. None of that is true. They know. They saw. They felt. And still, they chose to do nothing. Because to them there is no problem. Good people, even when they hurt others unintentionally, feel something inside. They wrestle with it. They think about it. They wonder if there was something they could have done differently. And even if they're not perfect, they want to make things right. They want to understand. They want to grow. Because to them, other people matter. Feelings are not dismissed. Pain is not ignored. But bad people are different. When they hurt you, the only person they think about is themselves. They don't care how you feel. They don't lose sleep over your sleepless nights. They don't worry about the tears you try to hide. Because in their world, people are tools. And if hurting you gets them something they want, then your pain is just the cost of doing business. They don't apologize. Because they don't believe they're wrong. Even if you speak up, even if you explain, even if you point to the exact moment your heart broke, they'll still find a way to blame you. They'll twist it, make you doubt yourself, say you're too sensitive, that you're overreacting, that you need to learn how to manage your emotions. And if you believe them, they win. They never have to admit anything. They walk away with peace of mind, while you sit there wondering, maybe I'm just too weak. That's not forgetfulness. That's coldness. Bad people don't forget your pain. They just don't care if it exists. They see it all. They understand exactly what they did, but they made a choice. And that choice says more about them than any excuse ever could. They choose not to apologize, not to listen, not to turn back. They choose silence as a way to erase accountability. Because to them, admitting fault is weakness. And weakness is what they fear the most. You may ask yourself if they'll ever change. If one day they'll wake up and finally see the damage they've done. Maybe. But not because of you. Not because your pain was powerful enough to reach their conscience. But because one day, life will force them to face themselves. And when that moment comes, if they're brave enough to look in the mirror, they'll understand. But if not, they'll continue living as if they've never done a single thing wrong. The most dangerous part isn't that they hurt you. It's that afterward, they did nothing. No apology. No effort to repair. No recognition. They let everything drift away. They walked out of the conversation. They walked out of the room. And they never came back. They kept on living, as if you were nothing more than a breeze that passed by. And there you are, standing still, holding the weight of it all in your chest. No one is perfect. Everyone has caused pain. But the difference between a good person and a bad one isn't in the mistake. It's in whether they acknowledge it, whether they make it right, whether they care enough to honor someone else's heart. Bad people don't withhold apologies because they don't know better. They do it because they don't care. And sometimes, knowing that is the very first step toward walking away from people who were never willing to see your worth. There is a clear sign of emotional maturity. It is the ability to admit when you're wrong, not because someone forces you to, but because you are honest enough to face the consequences of your own actions. But with bad people, that never happens. They don't admit fault, not because they are never wrong, but because they refuse to carry the weight of responsibility. There is one thing all bad people have in common. When trouble comes, they don't stand still. They look for a way out. They look for another name. They search for an external reason to blame. They never look at their own actions. They look at everyone else. And the only question they care about is, how do I avoid being held accountable? They blame their partner, their colleagues, their parents, their past. They blame the situation, the environment, the timing. But never once do they say, "I was wrong." Because to them, admitting fault is the same as admitting weakness. It is an admission that they are not perfect. And that goes against the image they are trying so hard to protect. This is what exhausts you when you are around them. Every time something goes wrong, you find yourself carrying the blame. They tell you you're too sensitive, that you misunderstood them, that you're the one who's ruining everything. And slowly you start to believe them. You start to wonder if you're always the problem, if you're always the one who gets it wrong. And the danger is, the quieter you become, the more convinced they are that they're right. Bad people are masters of emotional manipulation through blame. They make you feel guilty for how you reacted. They twist the story to turn themselves into the victim. They shift the focus away from what they did and place you in the hot seat. They don't want the truth. They want control over the narrative. That's why it's impossible to have an honest conversation with them. The moment you express how you feel, they become defensive. They interrupt. They deny. They tell you you're judging them. They flip the conversation so fast that you lose track of what's true. And by the end, you're the one apologizing. They walk away untouched. Behind the blame lies a deep fear. Bad people are afraid to face the truth that something is wrong inside them. They don't have the courage to acknowledge the broken parts within. They need a world where they are always right, because only in that world can they stay in control. They cannot accept that they may be the source of someone else's pain, because if they did, they'd have to change. And change requires honesty. It requires courage. It requires a heart that sees others as equals. They do not have that. Bad people never take responsibility because they do not value the feelings of others. To them, if something happened and they didn't suffer the consequences, then there's nothing that needs fixing. They are not looking for healing. They are looking for escape. They do not want to grow. They only want to avoid. And when you stay around people like this, you slowly become someone you no longer recognize. You learn to stay silent, even when you're hurting. You learn to say sorry, even when you're not wrong. You learn to keep the peace by accepting the blame. But that is not peace. That is the slow erosion of who you are. A mature person knows that making mistakes is part of being human, and learning to take responsibility is the first step toward becoming someone others can trust. Bad people don't lack the ability to understand this. They simply refuse to accept it, because doing so would make them feel small. But the truth is the opposite. The one who can say, "I was wrong," is always the biggest person in the room. Not everyone who hurts you uses force. Not everyone who is toxic screams or shows their cruelty in obvious ways. Sometimes, the most dangerous people are the quiet ones, the gentle ones, the ones who know exactly how to control your emotions without ever raising their voice. They don't use their hands to make you do what they want. They use guilt. They use silence. They use disappointment. They make you question whether you are ever enough. The skilled manipulator never gives commands. They simply make you feel that if you don't do what they want, you're the one who's wrong, and then you do the rest. You try to make them happy. You try not to upset them. You try to keep them close, because you fear being the cause. They don't have to say much. They just pull back a little love, a little presence, a little warmth, and suddenly you start to feel like you're the one at fault. They ask for nothing, but you end up giving everything. They know you're sensitive. They know you overthink. They know you care deeply and never want to hurt others. And they use those beautiful parts of you to keep you in place. They don't help you grow. They make you shrink. They don't create space for your strength. They create loops of self-doubt. And strangely, you stay. Not because you don't know what's happening, but because you're not sure if your feelings are valid anymore. Emotional manipulation doesn't come from strangers. It comes from those you trust, from the ones you once believed truly understood you. That's why you keep giving them another chance. You think maybe you misunderstood. Maybe they're just tired. Maybe tomorrow will be different. But tomorrow comes, and nothing changes. Their silence, keeps pulling you into silence. You learn not to speak, not to ask, not to feel. Because every time you are honest, they make you feel like you're too sensitive. And you start to doubt your own heart. Bad people are not always loud. Sometimes, all they do is make you feel wrong for speaking the truth. They convince you that your pain is your problem, not theirs. They twist reality with subtlety. Sometimes they disappear completely, forcing you to chase after a resolution for something you didn't even cause. They don't shout. They just pull away piece by piece. And you fear that withdrawal like it's the loss of air itself. That's what makes emotional manipulation so dangerous. It's not obvious. There is no clear proof. No cruel words. No violent acts. Just a quiet ache in your soul that whispers something is not right. But you can't explain it, so you keep enduring. Good people also feel disappointed. But they speak. They explain. They engage. Bad people don't. They punish with silence. They create emotional distance as if it were a weapon. And that's what scares you. Not them, but the fear of losing their approval, their warmth, the closeness you once believed was love. You must be awake enough to recognize this, because if you don't, you will live inside an invisible cage. A place where you are always walking on eggshells, always careful, always apologizing for your own emotions. You'll lose your voice. You'll stop being yourself. No relationship is ever healthy if you are not allowed to be who you are. If you are constantly forced to choose between honesty and peace, and you keep choosing peace because you're afraid to lose them, then that's not love. That is control. And those who control don't need power. They use affection. They don't need to raise their voice. They just make you fear the loss of love. And that is enough to keep you there, not because you are loved, but because you are afraid to be left behind. Some people walk into your life not to lift you up, but to make you question your own worth. Not through harsh words, not through violent actions or direct insults, but through quiet comments, invisible glances, and repeated comparisons until you no longer recognize how much you've changed. They don't tell you that you're not good enough. They just mention how amazing their ex used to be. They don't say you're wrong. They simply highlight that someone else would have done it differently. They don't demand you to change. They just make you feel that unless you do, you won't be enough to stay in their life. And so, you start trying, not because you want to, but because you're afraid not to. A toxic person doesn't need to criticize you out loud. They just need to plant the seed of inadequacy inside you. Not smart enough, not kind enough, not attractive enough, not strong enough, not worthy enough. And slowly, you begin to see yourself through their eyes. Each morning you wake up, you no longer see someone lovable. You see someone who needs fixing, who needs proving, who needs to earn value. This doesn't happen all at once. It seeps in slowly, a little more each day, like a quiet dose of poison. And you drink it, not because you're forced to, but because you're scared to lose the person you believe matters most. You begin to trade away your truth for their approval. And somewhere along the way, you stop being yourself. They never praise you unconditionally. Every compliment comes with a condition. When you do exactly what they expect, you get their validation. When you mold yourself into their ideal, you receive affection. But the moment you fall short, even slightly, the love fades. Not with anger, but with distance. They withdraw their eyes, their warmth, their nearness, and again, you feel at fault. So you try harder. You don't even realize you're being manipulated through the feeling of not being enough, because you think you're simply growing, becoming better. But becoming better never comes from fear. It comes from understanding, from unconditional love, from people who give you space to grow without losing yourself in the process. Toxic people don't want you strong. They want you dependent. They don't encourage growth for your sake. They condition you to evolve in ways that keep them close. that make you feel you need them in order to be enough. If someone truly loves you, they make you feel valuable even in your imperfection. They see the unfinished parts of you and never use them to make you feel ashamed. They don't ask you to become someone else. They help you become more fully yourself. But toxic people do the opposite. They make you believe that if you don't change, you don't deserve love. And that is the root of control. Because the person who fears abandonment will always try to please. Always ask, what did I do wrong? Instead of, do they really love me? You were not born to please others. You do not have to change just to hold on to someone who cannot see your worth. If someone makes you feel like you're not enough simply for being yourself, maybe they were never meant to stay in your life. Toxic people don't create safety. They create scarcity. They don't love you as you are. They love the version of you they can control. And if you have to lose your self-respect to keep someone, that's not love. That's dependency. A real apology is never just two words. It is an act of acknowledgement. It is a way of saying that the other person matters, that their emotions are worthy of respect. But to toxic people, an apology is never part of their vocabulary. Not because they are never wrong, but because they refuse to believe that someone else could be hurt by what they've done. Instead of apologizing, they choose another path. They make you feel guilty for speaking up. They make you feel ashamed for being sensitive. They make you believe that if you had reacted differently, none of this would have happened. They don't take responsibility. They unload the emotional weight onto you. And in the end, you're the one who apologizes. Not because you did something wrong, but because you can't bear the distance, the coldness, the feeling that you are the problem. Toxic people don't need to raise their voice. All they do is withdraw their energy, their attention, their warmth, and you do the rest. You make the first move. You reach out. You apologize. Not because you're confused about what happened, but because you're exhausted from the silent war. You choose peace by carrying a weight that was never yours to begin with. And over time, you start to believe you're always the one at fault. You become afraid to express your real emotions. You hesitate to say what's bothering you. You hide your hurt because you know it will somehow be turned against you. And one day, you no longer know what's real. You can't tell if your feelings are valid or if they're just another problem to fix. A healthy relationship isn't one where there are no conflicts. It's one where, when conflict arises, both people step forward, both take part in healing, and both are willing to apologize. But toxic people don't do that. They wait. They watch you twist in your own discomfort. And when you finally come forward to apologize, they say nothing. They remain silent, as if their silence is a verdict. They don't forgive. They hold on to the silence like a knife suspended in the air. Because to them, apologizing is weakness. It's a loss of control. It's admitting they were wrong. And that is something they cannot allow. They would rather lose you than lose their power. They would rather see you suffer than take responsibility. Toxic people don't care about resolution. They care about position. As long as they feel they're above you, they feel safe. But if they have to humble themselves, they feel like they've lost. And to them, losing is unacceptable. So apologizing never happens. Even when the harm is undeniable. Even when you ask for nothing more than a simple sentence. Still, they remain silent. Because in their mind, pride means control, not sincerity. But what they don't realize is this. Refusing to apologize doesn't make them stronger. It only erodes the trust of those around them. A relationship doesn't survive in silence after hurt. It survives in humility, in kindness, in being big enough to say, I was wrong. When you stay around toxic people long enough, you start becoming the one who apologizes for everything. You apologize for your real emotions, for your rightful needs, for wanting respect. You apologize for being hurt, and in doing so, you lose your boundaries. You forget what it means to stand up for yourself, because you've grown so used to bowing down. A toxic person never makes you feel loved. They make you feel like you have to work hard to be loved. They don't give you peace. They give you pressure, a constant pressure to not be left behind. And the heartbreaking truth is, the more effort you put in, the more they believe they're right, that they don't need to change, because you've been doing the changing for both of you. A toxic person doesn't need to do something obviously cruel to control you. All they have to do is keep you unsure of where you stand. They don't say they love you, but they never walk away. They don't reject you, but they never define the relationship. They keep you suspended in the in-between, where everything is vague, where you have no answers, but also no clear reason to leave. And in that confusion, you begin to ask the wrong questions. Instead of asking why they won't be clear, you ask what you did wrong. Instead of wondering what they truly feel, you try to change yourself to become what you think they want. You take the responsibility upon yourself, believing that if you were just good enough, things would be different. But the problem was never that you weren't enough. The problem is that they never intended to offer clarity, because clarity means commitment, and commitment means losing options. Toxic people always want every door left open. They want to keep you close, but they also want the freedom to choose someone else at any moment. They don't choose you. They just keep you in a waiting room. Ambiguity is the tool they use to control. They keep you in a state of unease so you'll keep trying. So you won't ask direct questions. You live in assumptions, in waiting, in hope. And each day, you sacrifice pieces of yourself in exchange for something they never actually promised. Toxic people don't communicate with honesty. They communicate through distance, through silence, through unpredictability. They don't tell you what you mean to them, but they won't let you leave either. They keep you hooked with scattered moments of sweetness, hidden between long stretches of coldness, just enough to keep you from giving up, but never enough to feel secure. And eventually, you become addicted to the uncertainty, because in the instability, you start assigning meaning to the smallest things. A reply after 5 hours feels like a gift. A simple question about your day feels like proof they care. You start living on breadcrumbs of hope instead of a steady love. Toxic people don't control you with words, they control you with your own longing. They make you feel that if you just try a little harder, things will change. And that's what keeps you. Not love, but the absence of an ending. A good person won't keep you confused. They don't create emotional fog to hold you in place. They speak directly. They are clear. They let you know where you stand in their life. And if they cannot give you what you need, they let you go. Toxic people do the opposite. They won't give you closure. They'll keep you trapped in a loop of hope and disappointment. So you can't walk away, but you also can't move forward. Remember this. If someone constantly makes you guess, makes you wait, makes you interpret their silence, they are not giving you love. They are testing your limits. They are watching to see how long you will tolerate the uncertainty. Real love does not require you to decode it. It does not ask you to live in confusion. It does not expect you to work endlessly to answer the simplest question. Do I matter to them? And if you've had to ask that question too many times, maybe you already know the answer. One of the most dangerous things about a toxic person is not what they do when they hurt you. It's how they make you believe they will change. They don't say, "I won't do it again," in a careless way. They say it skillfully, at the perfect moment, just when you're about to walk away, just when you've started to think clearly again. And because you still care, you stay. But then, it happens again. Not because they don't know they were wrong, but because they never intended to change in the first place. What they want isn't growth. What they want is time. Time for you to calm down. Time for you to soften. Time for you to forget how much it hurt. A toxic person doesn't need to keep hurting you constantly to stay in control. They just need to create a cycle. A cycle that feels familiar pain, apology, tenderness, hope, but all of it is temporary. The only thing that stays the same is who they truly are. They don't change because they don't feel the need to. When every mistake is forgiven, when every apology is accepted, When every promise buys them more time, why would they actually do the work? The truth is, people only change when they face real consequences. But if the worst consequence is a few days of silence and one difficult conversation, then, to a toxic person, that's not a boundary. That's just a minor inconvenience to get through. They don't learn from their mistakes. They learn how to explain them more sweetly. They don't care that you are hurt. They care whether you're still willing to stay. Their regret doesn't come from love. It comes from the fear of losing control. You used to think, they mean well. They just need time. But over time, you begin to see that no real progress ever happens. Just enough adjustment to keep you from leaving. And then you wonder, am I asking for too much? Or am I accepting far too little? A toxic person doesn't change because they don't think they need to. They believe you'll get used to it, that you'll adjust your expectations, that you'll learn to love them no matter what they do. And if that becomes true, they will keep repeating the same harm, because they believe you'll never be brave enough to walk away. Real change always comes with action. Not words, not promises, not a few good weeks. It shows up in consistency, in the way someone values your feelings as much as their own desires, in the way they understand that repeated harm is no longer a mistake. It is a choice. A good person knows that if they don't change, they will lose something precious. A toxic person knows that if they fake change well enough, they lose nothing. And the painful truth is, many people stay because they're still holding on to hope. The hope that this time will be different. But if you've had to forgive the same mistake too many times, the problem isn't your weakness, it's their lack of honesty. Toxic people don't evolve. They just become better at convincing you to accept them exactly as they are. And that's why, if you're still hoping one day they'll become someone else, maybe it's time to ask yourself this. Are you in love with Timur? With the version of them they've never truly become? Not everyone who enters your life destroys you with direct blows. Some do it by slowly dripping doubt into your heart. They don't forbid you from being yourself. They simply make you unsure of who that even is anymore. Toxic people rarely scream in your face that you're not enough. They just sigh when you do something you believe in. They don't openly criticize you. They ask questions that make you doubt yourself. They don't shatter your trust in the world. They just weaken your trust in yourself. Every time you express a real emotion, they call it weakness. Every time you set a boundary, they call you cold. Every time you ask for space, they say you're running away. And slowly, you begin to distrust your own instincts, doubt your natural reactions, question the emotions that once felt completely valid. They don't force you to change, but they push you to adjust just enough to hold on to the relationship. And the danger is, you don't even notice that you're changing. You just notice you laugh less freely, speak less openly, feel less like yourself. They don't bind you with rules. They bind you with expectations, with unspoken standards, with quiet disappointment. Every time you fail to meet something they never said out loud. And because you love them, you adapt, you try harder, you bend, until one day you don't even know who you are anymore. Real love never asks you to lose yourself. It helps you see the best in yourself. It doesn't shrink you. It expands you. It doesn't make you feel small. It makes you feel whole. But toxic people don't love that way. They don't love you to grow with you. They keep you where you are so they don't have to grow themselves. And to do that, they make you believe that if anyone needs to adjust, it should always be you. That's how toxic people make you disappear. They don't have to impose anything. They just make you doubt whether you can be loved as you are. If you've ever felt like you're becoming someone you no longer recognize, if you've ever heard yourself saying things you don't believe, if you've ever sat in silence, swallowing your tears because you knew speaking would only get turned back on you, then it's time to pause and ask yourself, are you protecting love? Are you protecting a relationship that's slowly erasing you? A good person doesn't break you from the inside. They don't ask you to give up your self-worth to be loved. They love you as you are. They don't make you feel like you need fixing. They make you believe you're valuable, even before you're perfect. When you walk away from someone toxic, what you face isn't a void. It's the journey of finding yourself again, remembering who you once were, what you used to dream of, what you used to say with a confident voice. Remembering those moments when you trusted yourself, when you felt free, when you laughed without scanning anyone's face for approval. And then you realize what you lost wasn't love. What you lost was yourself. But the good news is, you can still find your way back. You can still live a life that feels real, with a heart that's no longer confused. A life where you don't have to apologize for your true feelings. Where you don't have to fear losing someone just because you dared to be who you really are. Because in the end, loving the right person doesn't drain you. It doesn't make you perform. It doesn't make you smaller. Loving the right person helps you grow. It makes you confident. It allows you to be exactly who you are and still be loved completely.